Always got to adjust the mic. It's never where you want it. So today, I'm going to move the camera right from the very beginning. Today, I'm going to freestyle a little bit about expressing yourself. And that might sound a little foo-foo to some of you, but there's a lot of importance in figuring out ways to express yourself. Because if you don't, you sort of explode. And that can be a problem for you and everyone around you. Sorry, I got to adjust a little so I can see myself. So expressing yourself is a big deal, right? I mean, it's a big open field of what the heck could you possibly mean, you know? And I'm going to go through as many as I can riff. Because as you know, with deep thoughts, I'm always trying to talk about things that are important, but that we never talk about. And a friend of mine reminded me that she expresses herself. And I thought, wow, that's a great subject, because I think we inadvertently do it. And that helps definitely exhaust emotions that we have. You know, you can express yourself and be excited. You're going to be angry. But then there's this beautiful oasis of art and creativity within you. And a lot of people think, well, I can't express myself because I'm not an artist. I don't paint, I don't draw, I don't play instruments, I don't sing, and I definitely can't dance, right? Well, there are other ways of learning how to express yourself. And of all those things I just mentioned, you can actually learn a lot of those things. But before we get into the very specifics of how to express yourself, as this big giant helicopter flies over, I really want to limit just a little bit about its importance, because there's different levels of it. There's a game out there that I guess they still make it. I used to play it a long time ago, about probably 15 to 20 years ago. It was called The Sims. It came out by Electronic Arts, where I worked for the better part of 10 years. And it had a really interesting dynamic, and it's made by a guy named Will Wright, who's a genius. He became smarter and smarter as time went on. He made SimCity first, and then he thought about it, made The Sims, and then he made another one called Spores, which didn't do too well because it was so complex and needed a lot of investment to make it, but I'll leave that for your research. But Sims had something very, very interesting, and the way the game worked was that you control people, and you have a little household, and you can rotate it in 3D, you could design it, and you have people that walk around, and usually you're given the first version you were given a husband-wife choice. The next version you could take any role in the neighborhood, and you can make it more difficult for yourself. But the reason why I mention this is very specific. They had little meters for what your people needed in order to survive, do what they do. And one of the meters was social. And you had to go to the bathroom, you had to eat, you had to be entertained, that sort of thing. But social was a very powerful bar, and it was different than all the other ones because it was a little more tough to actually create, or actually to satisfy. And all it meant was you went over and talked to somebody else. If you didn't, you went stir crazy, and your character would refuse to fill up any of the other bars. Your character could be fully rested, and they'll just lay on the ground and not pout. They'll just pout and do nothing because they're going nuts. They've got to get something inside them out. They must interact as human beings. And aside from expressing yourself in a very literal term, this game reminded me that the social interaction is a bar for all of us. And it was funny because after I played the game, and I know a lot of us, Electronic Arts played the game, we got familiar with that bar. We would, which I mean like a little thermometer in the game that would turn red if it totally sunk, like a gas tank. It would turn green if you totally filled it up. We would talk about how we have to get out. We've been inside all day developing something or working on something, and we just like, look, my social bar is at 0, and you fill up my social bar. And luckily in the game industry, especially in the Bay Area, we had incredible pastimes. We hung out all the time, went to concerts, paintballed, and just did all kinds of stuff aside from playing games. And I think that what's going wrong in society today, one of the things, and one of the reasons why our kids are stuffed into cell phones, And the reason why we can't have a second of our life that's not stuck in one of these phones is that that's become our way of expressing ourselves and the way of satiating this sort of isolation. George Carlin said that we have a lot of technology, but we're more isolated than ever. And I think even Charlie Chaplin said it in The Great Dictator speech at the very end of that film, which you haven't seen. It's the greatest speech ever recorded in my lifetime, I think. If you just go to YouTube and say the greatest speech ever, look for Charlie Chaplin's face. He's dressed a bit like Hitler, which is part of the gag because he's playing a Jewish barber who is confused for Hitler at one point because he looks a little bit similar. But the more that we can sort of identify these subliminal things that we need, the more we can start to address them. And the more we address them, we become centered in ourselves. All of our little bars are at least at a satiated level. And, I normally co-host this show, the normal podcast version of the show I co-host with my friend Kyle Toucher. Kyle is an amazing everything, but the three big things that he does, I think he hasn't written in a while. I love his writing. His writing is amazing. But he's the lead singer of Dr. No, K-N-O-W. So he gets to write songs, play, if nothing else, just play. And he's got just a couple covers they do of Black Sabbath from time to time on stage. But most of the time he can play his own stuff he's written as a kid, stuff he's written more recently. On his day job, he does special effects. He actually coordinates and he's sort of a visual effect director where he'll put together shots from assets that people have created, and he creates the drama behind all these assets. So one kid's a brilliant spaceship creator, another one's a great, city creator or whatever, world creator, and he's the guy that's pushing the camera through based on what the shot needs and taking direction from the Uber director / producers. And he gets to express himself and put a little bit of his genes in there, things that he's figured out that look cool, and one of the untold truths about the guys that do that is that if you really get to know these people in the industry, you'll start to notice the shots that are their shots because they have their techniques, and they celebrate that amongst themselves. But this need to express starts to create a currency through your body, almost like electricity. And why say that? Well, the opposite of that is that you become a dead end. You become sort of a cul-de-sac of I would almost say wasted ideas and wasted energy, or at least it's preserved energy and preserved ideas that never get expressed because they're just sitting inside you doing nothing, right? Once you open up a valve and let that expression out, whatever you're doing, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples here, you start to notice that someone out there not only just likes what you do, but loves what you do. And sure, there's more people that dislike it than like it on average, but you won't care. Most people who dislike things don't stop by to say they dislike it. They just move on. They look at the, whatever it is, the thumbnail of whatever you're doing and just move on with life. And that, once you have a bite where someone likes what you've created, no matter what it is, and again, it's all over the map, so we're going to go through lots of different examples here because you're going to find that you actually have something that's really cool. You start to feel value inside yourself. Because let's face it, we build up ourselves as human beings. Remember, we make choices as to who we are as human beings, and those choices direct what we do with life, right? And someone else has made very similar choices, but they're not able to express themselves either. Or they don't know how. They want to, but they don't know how. And here comes your little tiny idea, that little thing you thought, you did it for yourself. The best thing to do is express yourself for yourself. Once you get into, trying to express yourself just to impress other people and not do anything for your own heart, you tend to come up with very trite, boring stuff. And it's that you don't care about it. They don't necessarily care about it. Or you have some hangers-on that liked your previous stuff, and now they're trying to feed themselves with your new ideas, and it just doesn't work out. That's why a lot of musicians have the greatest first or second album, but by their third, they're starting to fade because the industry that they sign the record deals with are pushing them really hard to be creative and expressive, and they're also pushing them out on tour, they're pushing them out on television, and they just don't have the time to feel themselves. A lot of times expression comes out of suffering, and when you suffer, you come up with these great means of expressing yourself and saying, that sucked, and I wrote the song about it, and here's how it goes, right? Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails said after his first 2 albums, and I have to take my hat off to this guy, because he was one of the first guys to really admit it. He goes, look, my life got great after I became a musician. He goes, I have all the money I'll ever need. I got all the stuff I ever need. I got the fame I never knew I wanted or whatever. And then he really struggled. Instead of coming up with giant albums full of 20 songs that were great, he just started coming up with singles that were powerful. And even those struggled to really engage his previous audience. And I think that in some ways his first 2 albums got other people out of their funk as well. So his fans became more happy, and they weren't necessarily attracted to his sort of dense, minor key, tension-filled kind of hate-exhausting lyrics. You know, he just vented it out of himself. And I think that I'll tell you some stories about my own experience writing, that it does really help if you have something negative in you, you vent it out through your expression, and it's gone forever. You know, it could be sadness, mad, frustration, whatever, being lost or whatever. You'll find yourself in the middle of this process. So it's very vital that we realize that we have this pent-up energy inside ourselves that actually has a name. It actually has a color. It has a frequency. You know, the Hindus talk about that when we speak to each other, one of the ways that we can tell what someone means is that they describe it in a very visual way. They say that once I come up with a thought that's going to become expressed as something I'm saying to you, that it churns in the heart and the glands that are in here, right? They talk about the chakras, right? But it churns out of my heart. The idea gets sort of a frequency attached to it, and it comes up through a vocal means to you, right? I'm wiggling my throat, which is making sound, which is, you know, analog out through this microphone being recorded back to your brain. It's being digitized in your brain so you understand what I'm saying. But if we're together, especially face-to-face, you know that face-to-face is so much better than digital, right? This is not giving you my emotion. You're hearing maybe my voice that's giving you a frequency of my emotion and the kind of person I might be if we met, right? But if we're together, my flesh is by your flesh and my body's by your body, you're going to get the whole blown-out frequency of who I am as a person, which is why music is so unbelievably powerful. Because what is music? It's a bunch of waves of sound that actually churn the mathematics in your brain. All the chemical structures in your brain start to dance the same way the musician was feeling when they put it down. And so there's this amazing communion that we have, because I can make your brain state like my brain state. And that's one of the things you can do with all forms of expression, no matter what. So again, when you open up, especially if you've never done it before, it's almost exciting. There used to be this thing where you would say to someone, when I was a kid, Star Wars in my life is quite frankly the most successful box office smash, cultural hit of my 45 years on planet Earth. So there used to be this thing we'd say, well, have you seen Star Wars? And someone would say no, who's of age and you would think would have seen it. And when I was young, we used to have this expression of, or this reaction of like, almost as if you're dumb because you haven't seen it. What the hell's wrong with you? You haven't seen Star Wars? God, boom, boom. It's all negative, 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 right? But as you get older, you start to realize, maybe, because culture's changed and times have changed, but maybe it's timeless enough that we can say, really? You haven't seen Star Wars? Oh, man, you're in for a treat. You know, we're going to get our food lined up, our drinks lined up. We're going to have a night that would otherwise be cold and rainy, and we're going to sit inside while the storm's going outside. We're going to watch Star Wars. We're going to watch Empire Strikes Back. We're going to watch Return of the Jedi back to back, all 3 of them, right? And it's a happy thing. Well, the same thing goes for expression. If you've never done it before, get excited, because it's really, really cool. And if you've never done it, to the degree you've never done it consciously, let's just say, the amount of reward that's coming your way guaranteed, is almost boundless. And, when you fall in love with something or someone, you have that boundless energy, that amazing feeling, right? Well, that's what expression or expressing yourself feels like. It's phenomenal, right? So I debate saying this next section until the end, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of put this in your brain early. This is sort of an existential thing that I think is true. And I've met tons of people who are very, very well known for their expression, be it music, be it art, writing, whatever. And we all come together and we have this conversation, and we're sort of afraid to say what we've experienced. And I've talked about it on the show before, because I have a show on being creative, an essay back in the day. This is going to be more pointed at being giving that creativity a purpose and a value and a need in your life. So it's a little bit different tense here, with a lot more examples. But it goes something like this. To the degree you arrange your life to take advantage of expression, the universe will dial into you. Now, what does that mean? Well, imagine your buddy next door, let's just say, is frustrated at his job. And he comes over while you're watering your lawn, and he says to you, man, if I just had $1 million, I'd cut logs and sell firewood, And you go, wow, do you have an experience cutting firewood? No, but I think that'd be a good job, right? All these guys are from the Midwest in Kansas, just. But you look at the guy and you're thinking, wow, that doesn't sound like a very hard thing to start doing by yourself, right? Get an axe, go get some wood from somewhere, have it shipped to your house, chop it, sell it. But for some reason, the guy's not gearing his life for it. He won't buy the axe. He won't get the chopping log. He won't take his life seriously enough to get this thing started. And so when he asks you to loan him some money to get his dream started, you start looking at the guy like, I don't know that you take your life seriously enough. It's in your mind, right? For me to invest in you. You don't seem to really you don't really have the discipline to do it. And so you back off. Well, I'm going to suggest that the universe does exactly that with our mortal coils, because I think we're in this big, giant, infinite loop, and I think a lot more life is on the other side than down here in this form. If nothing else, equal amount. Just a hunch. But if you buy a guitar and you actually practice, you will start getting guitar things out of the ether. If nothing else, you're getting it because you practiced, right? So there's a mechanical level of practice you have to figure out. To teach your right hand how to control the strum, and you have to figure out how to finger however fast you want to play, right? If you're a lead, you're going to have to go nuts, and if you're just a chord player, rhythm guitar player, it's just the basics. Hold it all together, right? But if you don't get the guitar and you don't practice, you put the guitar away in the fancy case, you buy a thing and you hang it on your wall, and it's pretty on the wall, but you're not practicing, then nothing's going to come to you with that. It'll just be a decoration on your wall and a lost dream that never turns into anything, right? Same thing goes for everything. Art of any kind. If you don't write junk for a little while and show the universe that you've got this ability to go past just the boredom of the first train crash, right? Because usually, unless you're just, super gifted, and I can't say that this thing I'm talking about doesn't happen to everyone. At least happens to me in every category of life that I actually try to get creative in. If you're ebbing back in after a long time of being off, man, you just feel dead for a little while. You have one great idea for a second, but then all of a sudden, boom, brick wall. And if you want to get through that brick wall, you're going to have to knock it down with your bare hands, and it's going to be tough. And you're going to have to go through the attrition in your heart of like, God, am I supposed to be doing this? The answer is, if you do, you're going to know, because you're going to be willing to push through that barrier of, writer's block or whatever type of block that you have. So before I get into the specifics that you can run off and express yourself with, and the subtleties of expressing yourself, I just want you to know, look at your life right now and remember all those things that you had a dream about doing that would fall into this category of expression. And I have rarely bumped in fact, I'm not even sure I've bumped into a single human being in my lifetime that when I have this conversation about their dreams, there isn't one thing out there that they love that is pure expression It's not necessarily catching a fish and bringing it home. That's something that's fun to do. Go do that. That's awesome. But there's usually something where they want to whittle the wood while they wait for the fish to get, bobbled on the thing. And that wood, once it's carved, has an expression of their choices, right? And they put it up and people will go, man, that's crazy. My grandfather, I said on one of the previous essays, he got into whittling wood very late in his life. And one of the only relics I have of his is a wooden duck, a few wooden ducks that he actually carved. Pretty cool. But that didn't happen until he was probably in his 60s, right? So I'm glad he did, because now I have a little expression of my grandfather. Every little nook and cranny in this duck is his choice on how to put the knife down, right? And even his mistakes make it his, which makes me feel like I got a piece of his DNA with me, So again, that's another byproduct of expressing yourself. We're going to latch on to at the end. But as I go through all this stuff, I want you to, if you're listening to me and you got a little, work environment, or you think about your home, or you're in your home, or wherever the heck you are, think about it. Do you have what you need to even begin? And again, this is all fun. This is not bad news if you don't have what you need. You just need to go get it. And let's move into some of the things that you can do. Now, a lot of people think that expressing yourself the way I'm talking about is some master artistic thing that you have to be a Rembrandt or a Picasso or a Mozart or some other thing to participate in expressing yourself. And I'm going to tell you it absolutely does not. I give you a couple tricks that you can do while you listen to me, because I'm not going to really be editing in, stills into this thing. But get a piece of paper for a second, at least in your mind. Get yourself a piece of paper and draw two parallel lines. No, don't worry about being perfect. Just draw two parallel lines. Step back from a second and look at two parallel lines. And I want you to feel what those two parallel lines mean to you. And I'll tell you what they mean to you. If you did them relatively accurate, you're going to feel order, organization, precision. To the degree you got them off, if they're not quite parallel, you're going to feel error or dynamicness, right? It's not wrong or right, man. Really, I shouldn't have used the word error, but you're going to definitely feel chaos if you get them sort of pointing at each other. Because you have bred in your soul, in your mind, what order looks like and what chaos looks like. Now clear the sheet of paper, or take the same piece of paper, and now start drawing wiggly lines all over the place. Just make them intersect on each other and move them around. Now look at it. Now you see the nebulous chaos that for some of you, you're going to get anxiety. It's going to be that tangled earbud that you never want to have. When you pull them out of your bag, you want them nicely rolled up so you can nicely unroll them, but they never do, right? They're all tangled up. Maybe it's your shoestrings when you were a kid. Or maybe one of you goes, man, that feels so much better. The two parallel lines, that's Squaresville, baby. I'm gonna live in this Jackson Pollock kind of a chaos. That makes me feel better. Maybe the emotion that attaches to the parallel lines versus the squiggly lines, depending on which one you're going to attach more to one of those two sets. And it's going to tell you whether or not you're feeling like you need order in your life or feeling like you need to break out, maybe get a little crazy, crazy fun, right? That's just a real simple example of how form has an expression. It has a meaning inside yourself. Now take colors. Now, unless you're sitting in a black and white world where you're watching this, like I am, whatever happens to color my videos, I don't know. Look at colors. I used to teach a course in interface design in the 90s, and it's when monitors were starting to become color monitors from black and white monochrome monitors, the old DOS days, right? And as soon as we could make color, we went crazy with it, right? It was like when we had fonts for the very first time. People wrote these ransom letters home to their parents because they kept changing the font every other word just to prove they could do it, and it's fun to do when you first get started. But color has a tremendous impact on us, and everyone knows this, right? When you buy a car, you have a choice of what color your car is. When you buy your clothing, you have a choice of what color you buy your clothing. And that color choice is you, deep down inside. Especially when you're going to pay $20,000 to $30,000 for a car or more, that color is very important to you. When women buy shoes, that's when they understand color really well. When men buy ties, that's when they understand color very well. Now, some of us are colorblind. I'm not colorblind. Some people are colorblind, and they can't see the spectrum like other folks. But still, the shades that they can see mean something to them. And usually colorblind doesn't mean you're completely black and white in your mind. It just means that certain color ranges don't register very well. But believe me, of the colors that you do see, they mean something to you. So now take the line example and the color example and mix them together. Oh my God. Get some color pens out. When you see little kids draw and scribble at the very beginning of their life before they can really discern, I can make a head and then some body and some arms and legs and stuff. Before they get there, they just get colors out and they go nuts. And then they choose another color. But the reason why they change colors is because the first one that they picked is exhausted in the drawing. When has a kid ever taken a good English class? When has a kid ever taken like a red, let's say, crayon and filled the entire page from one corner to the other corner? Just the whole thing's a big red block. If you have a kid that does that, I'd like to meet him. But usually they'll draw red until the pattern of red gets saturated in their mind, and they're almost gagged out. They're almost, they're done with that color. They put it down. And usually, those old, Barry and Smith crayon cases that have 50 to 100 crayons in it, man, it's just like, I get to choose the next color. And they pick this color out, and they'll draw. When we're a kid, we're taught, what's your favorite color? Because we have one a lot of times. And once you pick one, you sort of become loyal to it for the rest of your life, because to not be loyal to that pick means that you've turned your back on it. It's this weird thing. But you can change your mind, by the way. As we get older, we obviously can see more power to color. And when we're little children, we like very primary colors. Your pure reds, your pure blues, your pure orange. When we get older, we like sort of the pastel-y autumn colors, right? Depending on what kind of person you are. So you want to have like an autumn orange, some sort of burnt umber, browns, and you want violets and cool things like that, hot pink versus pink, that sort of thing. And we're making these choices because our insides are developing. And when you go for visual expression, this is the first category we're going into, it is color and form combined together. When I was a kid, I had a hard time understanding modern art when I was really, really young. Because for me, I was still trying to master mimicry. I was trying to master exact duplication of what I was looking at, because most of the classes that I was taking at the time that's exactly what they teach you. There's a face, draw that face. Go pick out a photo out of the box of photos and then come back to your desk and draw it and see how well you do. And eventually you get tired of that, and you start usually in black and white. Once you start using a pencil, and then you get a little bit more fearless and you move into ballpoint pens, and you get more fearless and experimental. You start using chalk. You start using kohl pens, pencils, and that kind of stuff. And you start learning the mediums. You start learning that there's things you can do with different types of devices. One of the things I learned a little late in the game in my teens was that you could draw, because I moved into ballpoint pens really fast. I love ballpoint pens. And because they were sort of forbidden when I was a kid, because they feared I was going to draw on the wall or something, which I never did. But with the pencil, when I got back into it in high school, I started drawing these faces that I would always draw, and I would bump it. I bumped it once with the side of my hand here, right? My teacher always said, don't touch the side of your hand to the paper, but I always did. Once I bumped and it smeared, I was like, oh man, I screwed up my drawing. But then I started looking at it, I was like, wow, I just created like the shade on a cheek perfectly, a gradient. And so then I started going, all right, started drawing and bumping it, and start bumping it in the strategic ways. I could make dimples in the chin. I could make all the shadows onto the lips, and eventually I just started drawing little clouds of pencil and then just smudging it with my finger to give it all this contour I never knew existed. And of course, you overdo it at first. Everything looks like blown out Baywatch tan at first, but eventually you start trying to pull back and you start using erasers to draw because you filled it in so much. It's too filled up. You get your art gum eraser out and you just roll it on the pencil. Oh, you took out a little too much, you just rub it back in, but now you're in control. You can subtract and add, and you start making these cool contours to make whatever shape you're looking for, right? You can make a ball, a sphere, a little shine on the top just by smearing in some shadows. It's very interesting. Now, it's very basic mechanics to get to a form of expression, but you're going to need to kind of jump into this however you want to jump into it. Now, the other big one is sound. And sound is just as profound as the imagery systems that we just talked about, right? Shape and color. Now, most of the time, sound goes exclusively into a music realm, and all the shape and form exclusively goes into an artistic realm. Now, of course, everything's art, of course, but you know what I mean. Just like rendering art, canvases, paper, that kind of stuff. But sound is a little tougher because the medium's a little less intuitive to mankind based on our pastimes to survive. What do I mean? I've taught art a million times to a million kids and adults. And you've probably heard me say on the show that if you have the mechanical skill to write whatever alphabet is your alphabet, and it's legible, right? Then you have the motor skills to draw anything you can see back here, anywhere you are in your room, you can draw and you can make it happen because you already do it all the time. What you haven't realized is that everything in my face and nose and this microphone and my body is just a letter that you know how to draw. And so you just need to combine all the letters, that make it all up. Look at this post, right? It's a big L shape right here. Well, this is just like the bottom of a G or a Y if you really stretch it out really nicely, So the idea is you have the mechanical skills embedded in you to render. And of course, there's millions of levels of that, millions of levels of photographic rendering if you want to go that far, if you're still using your hands and not a computer. But sound is an interesting one. We speak to each other in order to communicate, right, most of the time. And so sound is something that we make with our voice all the time. Now, I could argue with you that if you can talk and communicate with others, then you have, again, like the alphabet, you have all the tonal properties and tonal skills to actually make sound. But tone and sound are actually, unfortunately, not combined, as we've learned from Mr. Kanye West. It's a little more difficult. If you want to use your voice, which is one of the most, I think it's the most powerful instrument in the world in terms of what you can do with it. Now, of course, depending on your age and your range, you just have to find out what your scale is. There are definite tricks to figuring out whether or not singing is your thing, right? But that's why they make instruments. Instruments are a way for a person who's tone deaf to actually participate in the game at any level that you want, right? Now, when we're all kids, we run into a few instruments that are almost forced on us at school, right? One is the recorder, right? The thing looks like a clarinet, but it's just one solid state pipe that you just gate with your fingers. The other one is a kazoo. You just put this bladder in your mouth and start humming, and whatever you hum starts coming out of the kazoo, and it sounds so weird and funky that you're not really held to any tonal, goal. You're just making a bunch of noise. It sounds interesting. You can go up to a harmonica, which actually starts to have tone, and you're using your breath to push through the thing. But there's all kinds of instruments, right? And whatever music you like, if you like music at all, well, it's made of those instruments that you can actually have access to. Now, unfortunately, the price of getting into the music side of things, if you're not going to use your voice, it's an investment, right? But I tell you what, right now, guitars have never been more cheap. Basses, any type of instrument you really need on the, say, band side of things, right? You can obviously spend $25,000 on a guitar that's 30 years old, and people go, why? It's old. Why would I ever pay that much money? It's because it has a sound you can't get with modern instruments. But there's a lot of equipment that comes with the music industry, and it can get expensive extremely quickly. Something to keep in mind, if you like classical music, you haven't purchased an instrument in the classical realm of life, I will tell you that you haven't had your mind blown yet how expensive this stuff is. A clarinet that you might just look and it just looks like a clarinet, $4,500. You know, usually they're heirlooms that are passed down throughout the family because someone spends $4,500 and then everybody in that family has to learn how to play the clarinet because we spent this money on this thing and someone's going to use it. When I learned how to play the trumpet as a kid with my junior high, my father gave me his, not gave me, but let me use his trumpet, which is a beautiful trumpet. I think he sold it for quite a bit of money after sitting on it for 30 years, you know. So with the sound side of things, it's a little more intense. Now, let's talk about words. You've lived your whole life, most likely, regardless if you can hear or not, using words to construct most of your thoughts. Once you grow out of the coddling stage of being held as a child, which we all do still. But words are extremely, extremely powerful when you take them out of their goal of just base communication. I'll take that in combo number one with the fries and the Coke, right? Here's my money for the bill. No, honey, I haven't taken out the trash. That's utilitarian use of language, which gets the job done, keeps you out of trouble, and keeps you fed. But it doesn't really get to a level of expression. But the only thing you have to do to turn words into expression is decide to do it. When you go see a movie, or someone tells you a really cool story, or you're really into lyrics in music, you know what it's like to be moved. If nothing else, if someone tells you how they feel about you, regardless if it's good or bad, you're moved by it. Someone can tell you they hate you, and that hurts your feelings and makes you maybe angry or sad. Someone tells you they love you or really like you, and that makes you feel like you're just invincible, right? You have felt the effect of words on your body, on your soul, on your mind. There are things, if you're over 20, there are things that people have said to you in your lifetime that you'll never forget because it was the most amazing thing you've ever heard. Or maybe, unfortunately, maybe one of the most tragic things you've ever heard. But it still moved you. And it doesn't cost anything. Just like art. I mean, art, you have to buy pencils and paper and that kind of stuff and some goopy stuff you want to paint. But with words, most of us have phones, computers, or nothing else, a pad and paper. And we can choose the words to put down that other people are going to read. And they're going to incubate up a thought in their mind, and they're going to attach their experience in life with what you're trying to give them from your life, and it's become this very unique thing. And I give example. I used to write tons of crappy poetry, let's just put it that way. Only out of like maybe 550 that I wrote over the course of 10 years, I might let people read 5. Okay, that's how crazy it is. But at the time, I felt really good, and at the time, people that were reading it really liked them. But I used to have this old website, and all my poetry was up there. And then, this is before the web really exploded. There was no Facebook, there was no WordPress or any of that kind of stuff. So all sites were really ugly and weird. And then I found a couple people that were reposting my poetry with my name credited and everything and saying how moved they were by what I wrote. And I thought it was, swill, But these people were utterly moved, and they created blogs that talked about states of mind. I wrote one about depression, and that got stuck in a suite of a bunch of things about depression. And someone thought it was powerful enough to cut and paste it. And the whole effort of cutting and pasting and putting it in there, and it was with a very select few of other poems, and it was interesting. But what I learned about it was that even if I had lost the steam for what came out of me in that moment, and I'll get to the mechanism of that in just a second, it was perfectly connecting with someone else, because when they combine what I wrote with their state of mind, because they're traveling through life and just every once in a while just locks, boom, and they take it with them. And it helped this person get through this phase, and it helped them understand that someone else felt what they felt. And I know that every single one of you has had a conversation with someone where something clicked, where they're like, yeah, right? Well, every time you get a yeah, right, it's a very common thing now. We start to express that now, which I kind of like, right? You'll say, isn't this great? I love you and you love me. And you'll get this, yeah, right? Isn't that awesome? right? You're in a moment, you're in a cherry moment in life where the both of you just clicked. If it's not just for a split second, maybe it's for the rest of your life if you're lucky, right? But what I ended up doing, and the reason why I started writing, was that I went into two phases, really. One, I thought it'd be fun to write lyrics for this music that I was creating, because I couldn't sing and play at the same time at first, right? I couldn't do it. I'd start singing and I'd stop playing. I'd start playing and stop singing. And I would dumb down my songs. So as soon as I started singing, it turned into a rhythm guitar thing, right? Which is what most songs do, because your brain can't do two things at once very well at first, right? So anyway, what I started doing was I started writing unbelievably horrible song lyrics. The most cliche crap you've ever heard. And I always say that, when you first start writing, you'll start going after words like ecstasy really fast, right? Not the drug, but, the emotion, right? And you'll look back and you go, oh my God, look at that. Everybody goes through that phase, and you're rhyming like crazy because you feel like if you don't rhyme, you're not a good writer, and if you can ebb away from it and then back to the whole rhyming thing, then you might have the power to actually rhyme with really good beats and in terms of, tempo and metaphor all mixed together. But here's what I did. I wrote probably 2 or 3 dozen really just junky pieces of junk. And that was just to sort of tell the universe, right? I didn't know what I was doing, but I started telling the universe, I'm going to start writing. So the more we can get this process going, it actually means something. I'm here. I'm here with my pad and my paper. I used to sleep in bed at night with these two sitting next to me, and I just wake up and start writing. It even got so cool that I started writing in the middle of the dark, and one time I wrote a poem when I was in Twilight Zone. I was half asleep, half awake, and I don't remember what I wrote until the next morning. I was like, oh, that's wild. But what started happening, there was a gear switch. After priming this, a couple things happened. One, I think that existential thing I told you about happens, where the universe locked into me and said, okay, kid, you think you can write? You're gonna do this? All right, we're gonna give you the ideas. We'll see how well you pull this off, right? But the other big thing that occurred was that I taught my mind, if you have an emotion, write about it. It had 2 prongs to it. It had a fully artistic side where I just wanted to write about something, right? I would come up with these ideas. I call them suites, like this idea, almost like a script, a controlling idea that would govern all of the poems in this suite. And then I actually made it just a generic suite called The Dark Side. And it was everything that pissed me off at any point in the day. I just started writing. Sometimes it's a word processor. Most of the time it was in a notebook back in the day. Later, I became more electronic over time, but the mechanical nature sort of took away from the process for me at the very beginning. But I'll give you an example of the controlling idea that controlled a suite. I wrote several poems about a samurai that was in love with his empress, and he knew that he would never be able to be with her because he wasn't royalty, but he sort of translated his love into constantly protecting her. So his whole life was either about it, all of his writings, because samurais are supposed to write poetry and supposed to be botanists, take care of plants. They're supposed to be artists. They're supposed to be just completely aware of their world because they're taking life, and you need to understand the value of life to take it. And they're supposed to take it honorably, right? There's the old story about the samurai that chased a guy down for his whole life and finally found him, and he's just about to kill him, and he reads off his whole pedigree of who he is and why he's killing this guy, and the guy spits in his face. And the samurai put his sword away and walked away after a whole lifetime of searching for this guy. And when asked why, he turned around. He said, because it became a personal kill, and I'm not allowed to kill for my personal needs or my personal wants. I'm only allowed to kill because I've been charged by my leadership to go kill someone. I thought that was pretty interesting. I learned all the stuff about samurais when I was doing this. So I wrote a bunch of poetry as if I was him, which started to build this motor in me to empathetically be other characters, which then helped me in my writing for screenwriting. Another one I did was about a soldier that hated his king because he thought his king ran the kingdom horribly. And so he just cursed his king at the very beginning of this suite. And then by the end, he became the king and became hated and realized that there was a whole cabal that ran his kingdom and that he was never really truly in control and he could never really control the chaos around him. And he ended up being hated himself. So this irony of the twist, right? And then the dark side just funneled anything that was horrible in my life, like I said. But the nice thing was, as soon as I purged it out on paper, and it didn't matter one bit if what I wrote was good enough for you to read or anyone else to read, it got it out of my system. And I went on with a stress-free life. So there's something about writing that I think is huge. Now, people, we've talked about it in the past, but people used to have diaries a lot. We don't have any more diaries anymore. If you do, hats off to you. If you haven't, maybe what we call a journal. You know, guys carry briefcases, girls carry purses. So guys have journals and women have diaries, right? Same thing. If you write out your life and you write out your frustrations on paper, you'll often find that you've expressed out that churning feedback loop inside your chest that's killing you, right? And you put it on paper. And then it ceases to exist. That's what Trent Reznor did with all his heartbreak on his first album. He just got destroyed by a woman. And so he wrote it all out. And it was out of his system. And again, when he lost that inner struggle, he lost his mechanism for creating music until he figured out how to take happiness and make that music. You know, it's tough. Once you've learned the trick, it's hard. Something to keep in mind as you start to carve these avenues of expression. So I mention these because I want you to feel your own almost bulging ideas, the ones that are in your heart, in your chest, that are pushing out but don't really have a mechanism to get out. Because I think one of the side effects that happens is that we end up, especially with negative emotions, which I think is the first place you want to go if you have any. Hope you don't have any, but if you do, a frustration with something, it's almost as if you've ever had to laminate something with plastic. You put in the cover slip on your telephone, to protect the screen, and a little air bubble gets in there. And, you push on the air bubble, and you know that the only thing you can do is get it to exhaust out the side of the laminate, because it'll be stuck in there forever if you don't, because it just won't disappear. Same thing goes for your negativity inside you. If it's stuck in here, you're going to have to push on it until it gets out. And if you don't do it, it'll do it for you in terms of human biology and human psychology. And what'll happen is, and everyone's done it, is you might burst out on someone and you might project your negativity on someone that really is only in you. Or you'll take a situation that has a kernel of truth where this person does something that annoys you, and you'll catalyze it with this thing that has nothing to do with it, and it blows up in your face. It blows up in their face too, right? There's that funny scene in the movie Three Amigos when the bad guy El Guapo is talking to his sidekick Paco, I think. Maybe his name's not Paco, but he said he was busting his chops about whether or not he had a plethora of birthday gifts inside this fortress compound that they had. I used to think plethora was a Spanish word. And he said, yeah, sure, you have a plethora. And then Guapo looks at him and goes, do you even know what a plethora is? And the guy looked at him, and brilliantly written, he goes, Guapo, could it be that you're frustrated that a particular someone hasn't really opened themselves up to you and you're taking it out on me? So he figured out that the woman that he had captured that didn't want to make love to him was frustrating El Guapo, and he was just taking out his birthday gift count on his buddy, which was not what the case was. But this other thing collided with the conversation they were having, and he spills it out on his buddy, right? And he was big enough to actually, in this fictional character, he's big enough to pull back and go, yeah, I'm frustrated with this whole thing. So expression is a way to give yourself an avenue, a constant stream to vent off this negativity inside. Now, sometimes, I'm just going to go off the beaten path one time, which is this. Some people go to gyms to do this exact same thing. And all they're doing, and it works, is that they exhaust the mechanisms that have the energy to feedback loop on bad ideas. And so they might be mad at work or mad at a person or something like that, and they start pounding weights and or punch, doing shadow boxing or sparring with somebody, and it all becomes the other person. And so they sort of like beat them up in a way that they get it out of their system, right? They kind of shadow box the bad news in their life or whatever, and it works. And you could maybe stretch the rules of what expression is, but it gets it out of their system. But I'm going to tell you that if you can put it in a form that's amazing, that actually is visibly connected to what you do, or a complete diversion away, you can get this same effect. And I'll give you an example. I told you about the story of Anne Rice, who lost a child very young, and she supposedly locked herself in a room and started writing the Vampire Chronicles that she's famous for. And I'm not sure how she connected the two together, the loss of her son and this story. I think in some ways it might have been a diversion, which is my other son I'm going to talk about here. But I'll just say it from my own writing. When I actually had something bad happen, I read exactly about that. And man, I would acidically put down the maximum curve on my thoughts, right? And I'll give you an example. One of them was about the frustration that my generation, when I was in my 20s, and I just talked about this on the show, that as I dated women, or girls probably better described, and I would try to set it up, if we're going to go long term, I want to build a family, let's have some kids. And I would get this stupid excuse that they're not going to have any kids because it hurts, or they're not going to have any kids because it's going to take away from their personal life, as if they're going to be young forever, right? And I got really frustrating, so I wrote this whole thing about how, you don't have to convince any girl in any other country but America. And it's probably not ultimately true with Europe, but most third world countries, they would love to get married and have kids and just have that normal life, that atomic unit sort of lifestyle. And I couldn't convince anyone I met to do it. It was crazy, right? They just want to party for the rest of their life, sort of thing, right? So I wrote it out, and I wrote really, really just, I would say almost evil. That's why I called it the dark side. And these weren't for most people to read. Some of them I leaked out through my site, but that was about it. And again, they're all horrible. But I've got other friends of mine who have something negative going in their life they can't control. Maybe an illness or something. And they know the fact, they know how epigenetics works, which is another more advanced take on biofeedback. What you think is what your body becomes. That's a very esoteric statement, but hold on here for a second. What the inventor of evolution, modern evolution, not monkeys to men, but the fact that we know that we evolve wherever we came from, we know that we change over time, right? We get taller, as we've seen from trying to put on old armor from the Middle Ages. We know we've gotten the average heights become taller. Napoleon was not short. He's short today. He wasn't short back then. 5'8" was like 6'4" back in those days. So 5'3" was normal. But de Lamarck came up with this idea that the whole body is electrical and a thought is electrical. And so one of the avenues of evolution, aside from survival of the fittest, which is the crudest format, epigenetics says that we think ourselves into what we are. And if you go to onepagenews.com, read our articles on cancer, we talk about the fact that, if you're in an acidic frame of mind, you're constantly feeling repressed or upset or constrained, or you just feel like something has gone really wrong in your life and you can't change it. You must do anything you can to get that to change. And I mean, if death is okay with you, or worse, or not as bad as what you're in, then go ahead and stay in what you're in. Because it is death when you get stuck in those situations for a very prolonged period of time. I'm not saying when you have a bad week or a month or something like that, shit happens, right? But you need to get yourself out of those frames of mind, because it will destroy you inside. Your immune system reacts to that. You have something called neural peptides, which are created on the fly constantly based on your thought process, right? Which is why they want us to think the way we want to be. This whole thing about self-loathing will completely gate and limit your ability to express yourself in any positive way, because you have a limiter on how much you can think about yourself, which will limit how much love and beauty you can project out of yourself. If it's like, well, I can't take too many selfies, right? Now, selfies can get crazy, right? I would say if you want to take selfies, make them art, right? We have one of our listeners who painted himself, And that's his selfie. It's the most brilliant thing anyone's ever done. I don't have a single friend that's painted themselves, and I've got friends that could paint photographically. He was the first one. He did this amazing job painting himself, and he posted the progress as he did it. And it's artistic too. So what we want to make sure is that we understand why we're doing it. So the second part I was really trying to boil down to was that you can divert yourself away from negativity with your expression. You know, we have one of our listeners that has this amazing skill where he builds helmets, and it's all middle ages sort of. It's actually several eras of the old knights, you know, that used to wear leather and various metals, and he does this ornate work on it, and they look amazing when they're done, you know. And I guarantee you, when he's making that, he's feeling his heart. He's actually understanding that his concept of what a helmet is so utterly understood by the time he renders it in 3 dimensions that he can put on his own head, you know. And so, you know, I'm not sure that he's doing it to express a particular feeling or anything like that, but for him, it's an expression of his abilities. You know, it's just saying, I have attention to detail. I have the ability to hold something in 3 dimensions in my mind before it exists. I've got craftsmanship in my genetics, you know? And so there isn't one rhyme or reason why you want to express yourself implicitly, right? There's not a rule I want to say that you have to use to express yourself. I want to tell you that it's a mandate for you to be healthy. And again, the visual is, I started out with this, but the visual is that you have, the universe is always coming into you, right? You know, stuff happens in the world and it comes into you. And it's important that you have a controlled mechanism by your design for it to bounce out of you as well, right? Some people are absolute love bugs, man. They know how to love you better than anything in the world. And if you're not used to it, as a matter of fact, when I was younger, I would date people that were very love buggy, and I always thought I was too, but man, some people put me to shame. And sometimes it gets to the point where you're like, whoa, you know, are you liking me because you've discerned that you like who I am, or you're just liking me because that's what you do? You know, so at some points you can't quite understand why that happens. But the more you understand the intent of why you're doing something or why you feel a certain way, that's going to be the mechanism that lets you design the idea or the right form of expression to get that out. So let's say you know a lot of different ways to express yourself. As far as you're concerned, what you put on paper with pencil or pen is good for you. It doesn't have to be photorealistic. It could be very abstract, but it's good for you. Or you're a painter. Sometimes you do oils and they can be matured forever, right? Because they don't dry real quick. Sometimes you paint with acrylics. They're going to dry in 10 minutes. But you also know how to play the guitar, the harmonica, the violin. You can sing. Maybe you don't have to do any of that stuff, but you know how to dance. You know how to move your body. And when music comes on, it doesn't matter if you're winning a dance contest. That's not what I'm talking about. But if music comes on and you gotta move, right, then you know exactly what expression is, because that music goes into you, and man, it's got to make you move. And I'll give you an example of you being reminded that you have that and you intentionally choosing to do it. A lot of times in my life, it's really funny. When I was young, and I almost don't want to admit this, but when I was young, I really got into breakdancing when I was a kid. I was really the popper guy, you know, like sort of the upper body work and kind of moving around. And I used to make some money at it when I was a kid, about $100 a week. And I would dance for like the local Walmart to sell the albums, to sell the clothing, all sorts of crazy stuff. I don't know if I was any good because I can't remember. I remember being there, but I can't remember just seeing myself do it. We'd study all these videos and we'd do it. And it was like, it's what you had to do to that music for Kraftwerk and, Egyptian Lover and Jam on It and all those songs. You just had to move. You can't hold still when that music comes on, right? And then I went to high school and there was dances, right? And I was so shy. I was like, man, I can't get out there and dance. My God, I'm not going to pop out there. You know, it's like, And so someone dragged me out. I think it was my cousin. She dragged me out there once, and we danced in rows. And I was like, okay, this is all right. And I realized nobody can dance. This is great. So if I could just hold a beat, I got it made. When in high school, they started having dance contests. Again, I can't believe I'm admitting this to you guys, but I would dance, and they have little contests. And I have this girl that I never dated, but her and I danced once randomly and won the contest. And so every time we'd have a contest, we both got, I got a girlfriend, she got a boyfriend, and every time a dance contest would show up, we just turn around to our respective others and go, we have to go win this, and we get together, and we'd win. It was crazy. The only one we didn't win was because the winners were the people that threw the party. Thank God. Now here's the thing. Here's the reason why I mentioned this totally embarrassing truth about myself. I danced a little bit when I came out to California. A girl wants to go to a club, chill out, dance, whatever. But then I stopped. Of course, right? Then I would find myself at a wedding where someone had a jamming track and everyone's out there dancing, right? And all of a sudden it all came back to me. It was like, oh my God, yeah, I love doing this. Now, every time I think about myself dancing, anyone taping me or seeing me, which I don't think has ever happened as far as taping, thank God, I get totally that cringy feeling of like, oh God, surely I dance horrible, right? I can't visualize myself dancing. But that's like this weird thing that happens to me when great music comes on. And that's why, now I listen to headbanging music, you don't dance to it, you just bang your head to it. Techno, you just totally get down with your art or whatever you're doing, programming. But it was just interesting how sometimes we had these things and we lose them, and then we bump into them serendipitously. So for those of you who are perhaps over 30 and you've got kids or you've got a busy lifestyle and you're like, man, I don't have room in my place for an easel, to put up a painting, or maybe I used to paint when I was a kid. Try to do micro versions of anything that you've done. If you've ever sketched, man, you get little sketch pads this big, that thick, and you just roll through them and sketch. And eventually, if you got that little thing in you that has to come out, you'll start getting the bigger pads and the bigger pads because you sort of re-educated yourself that you do have this need to punch it out of your system, right? Instruments, a little bit tougher. I would say, again, start off really, really cheap so you don't blow out your wallet and you don't blow out your expectations, right? If you go buy a $3,000 Les Paul and you come home and you got the $500 amp and you're just in your living room going boom, and the doors blow up and you realize you can't play real fast, the kind of stuff you want to play, you're going to get depressed and probably back out of the project. So get a cheapie. If I like acoustic guitars, if you're going to get into music, especially a guitar of some sort, because if you can master an acoustic neck, you can jump on electric, and you just have to re-educate yourself about how the guitar is built. But there's definitely a lot of right-hand technique on electric that isn't quite the same on acoustic. But it's a great way to prove to yourself that you want to go to the next level. So anything that you want to get into, try to go as cheap as possible. That way the pressure's not on due to your wallet. I know that might sound like an interesting idea. Some people might go, well, yeah, I'll spend a lot of money and that'll put a lot of pressure on me. It's like, don't do that because that pressure hurts, unless you've got inexhaustible money, go for it. But I think you'll even find that working it from the bottom to the top is the way to start. Now, again, with writing, I talked about poetry, but forget that stuff. I mean, if you want to do poetry, I think poetry is great for one reason alone. You will learn more about your own language quicker than any other form of writing. If you jump off into a novel, you have to usually create a single voice that's the narration of that particular story. And then as you jump into each one of the prose for the dialogue for your characters, you'll be jumping in and out of different styles. But if you set it in the Midwest, you're going to write a bunch of accented phraseology and to keep it in the Midwest. It gets really messy very quickly. So if you've done it in the past, jump back in. That's great. I think that poetry will allow you poetry is small, bite-sized ideas. That's the nice thing about it. A long poem, if you're getting started, is going to be a page, 2 pages, Poems could be a couple paragraphs, right? It doesn't have to be, it could be one sentence, right? As long as after reading what you wrote, it gives you the exact tense and specifics of the emotion you were feeling, and you pass it to someone else and you say, what do you think of this, right? And they get it. Again, some people aren't going to get it, and some people are going to get it to an unbelievable degree. Now, on the note of maybe someone's not interested in anything that you do, another story, when I first moved to California. I brought some instruments with me, and I bought some more when I was here. And I started creating these like kind of cheesy instrumental albums, just really for myself to figure out what the hell was going on. But I'd copy them and pass them out to people. And each one of them had, I don't know, maybe like 12 tracks, maybe. And I do these cassettes, pass them out to folks. One of the most interestingly bizarre things happened very quickly. Even from the first album of stuff I created, I gave some tapes away to some friends, and they said, "Oh, that particular track, number 3, made me drive really fast on the highway. I really dug that. That really connected with me." I gave one to my boss, and he actually went home and he said that he made love to his wife to 2 or 3 of the tracks that happened to be back to back, because I slowed it all down and put 2 or 3 tracks together. But this guy, I honestly think he wasn't trying to blow smoke up my butt, because I don't think he liked me that much, but he said it was some of the best sex that he ever had. Right? It just hit them wherever they were in their life. Again, it comes across and locked in, and they had this specific moment. But then I started asking them, I asked this guy over here, did you like these tracks that these people made love to, right? And I didn't tell him why I was asking him, but he goes, "No, I totally didn't like that track at all." And the other one said, "No, I didn't like this other track." So out of the 12 some odd tracks per album that I would create, people either hated it or loved it, and it was always a different set of tracks. Why tell you that story? Because I personally believe that virtually anything that you do, especially with the internet, because anyone can find what you do as long as you put it out there somehow, right? You could write a book and have it self-published in 2 seconds online. No one ever has to negotiate with you whether or not your book is good. You can get it published. You can write a book and just pay to have it published. And they only make you pay per book that's sold, right? They'll even sell it on Amazon for you. It's crazy, right? I can write a book tonight that's just gobbledygook, right? Just junk text in there, and have it published by this publishing company, and they'll never tell me it's a bad book, but people can buy it if they want to, right? You can make any song in the world and get it on iTunes in a split second. Nobody is over your back saying that's a crappy piece of music, don't sell it. We've got viewers to create their own videos with their own theories about how certain things work in science, and people are eating it up like crazy. Doesn't matter. There's always a group out there that thinks like you think, and you can find them. And if you're watching me, you found me. Crazy, right? I'm sitting in my back room with just a handful of equipment here, making this thing happen as long as I bring it to you consistently, and I use my words, right? Which I learned how to speak through poetry, right? Bad poetry equal to hopefully good deep thoughts videos, right? But this is how the process works. So the reason why I tell you that is that I don't want you to have any discouraging pressure on your system. Nothing should discourage you from doing anything, because those in art in Los Angeles and New York have figured out, if they've been in art for 40 years, what they know is that quite literally, and this is made fun of in tons of comedies all over Hollywood, you could take trash and glue it to a canvas and sell it. And somebody will buy it, because they will figure out some reason why they thought that was cool. And if you even came out and said, I wanted to know how stupid people were, someone's going to walk up to that canvas and go, I like this thing because you called the bluff of art and you glued trash. You had the balls to glue trash to a canvas and sell it. I'm buying it because of the message that you're sending, that there are stupid idiots that will buy that crap. Really, nobody's stupid, right? It's just we're all made from different paths, and depending on, again, your upbringing, you'll make it happen. Again, with the internet, anything is possible in terms of selling. And again, anything is possible via the internet to figure out how to do the type of expressing that you want to do. If you're watching me right now, you got a search field up there on YouTube, right? Or, even on your mobile app, it's right there. You can type in that search field anything you want to know how to do, and most likely there's not one video, there's probably 100 videos that they're going to give you a choice from looking at. Paint, draw, sing, play any instrument in the entire freaking planet. How to write novels, how to write teleplays, how to write screenplays. Oh, you can even link over to the screenplay one I gave you, right? So, no excuses, no pressure, but I want you to control. Again, see the visual. See the visual. If you're like me, you're very visual. see life going into you. And if you don't have an expression, a way to gate that out of you in some means, then I want you to see the turmoil going on inside your chest and your mind, that you need to start opening some doors and letting it out. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. And again, if you dig these videos, pass them around. And I don't say that to drive up the count of the video. I say that because hopefully you can, if you get back into expressing yourself, or you supercharge what you're already doing, I'm sure you want to be surrounded by people that do it too. And if you have someone you think is very, very creative, but they haven't heard this message, and you don't have the time to say it, or maybe I said it better than you would say it in the time that you've got available to you, if you just want to repeat it, that's awesome. We want to make sure that the whole planet wakes up. Because back in the 60s, they dropped something called acid, and it woke everybody up. They felt how everything in the universe is connected. And love is connected to absolutely everything, right? And once people figured out love was connected to everything, wars cease to become a viable means of accomplishing anything. And the bankers that never dropped acid, they're still fighting the wars to this day, right? So we don't necessarily have to take an hallucinogenic. We can make art. And art is the free acid that we can get that's legal, right? So let's do that. Let's spread this message. Let's blow this baby up. Again, thanks for listening. MKUltraRadio.com. Let's express the rules that rule us. Over now.